we are at the bottom of 36b, and we'll start with Tan Rabbanan, which is like 3 lines up. Okay, continuing to discuss tefillin and the details. Tan Rabbanan, Rabbi's taught. Yadcha. Torah says you have to put the tefillin on your arm. Zuz small. That's your left arm. Not talking about small. I know what you mean. How do you know it's left? Maybe it's right. Talmud Lomar, Af Yadi Yasa Eretz, Vimini Tipcha Shamayim. So it says in Tehillim, God says, my hand established the earth, and my right hand measured out the heavens. Okay, so now, typically the way we understand Tehillim, there's a lot of parallelism, right? It says the same thing twice. It's parallelism, right? Just about every pasuk you come across in Tehillim is repetitious. But the Gemara, of course, doesn't take it that way. It says, well, if the first phrase says Yadi and the second phrase says Yamini, so the second phrase is certainly the right hand, so Yadi must be the left hand. V'yomer is a similar source. Yada layase tishlachna v'yamino lahomus amelim. She stretches out her arm to the peg, and her right arm to the hammer.
My Gemara says the earlier quote comes from Yeshayu. You mentioned Tehillim.
I did say Tehillim. I beg your pardon. I just made an assumption there. You are correct. It is Yeshayahu, but also similarly, it's obviously in poetic form. Anyway, but the Gemara takes it as we said. Yes, thank you for the correction. Okay, so and then we have the Omer, a third source. Lama tashiv yadcha v'yaminecha mikerev cheicha kale. Why would you take back your hand and your right hand from your bosom? So again, if the second phrase is your right hand, the first phrase yadcha must be your left hand. Rabbi Yossi Hachorim Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Masinu Yamin Shenikra Yad. Actually, the right hand can also be called Yad, right? Yad is not exclusively left hand. For example, Shenamar Vayar Yosef Ki Yashis Aviv Yad Yamino. Here it's quite clear that Yosef saw that Yaakov stretched out his right hand. Yad Yamino means his right hand. So the word Yad can obviously refer to the right hand. So, how are you so sure that Yad means left hand for tefillin? V'idach, so how do you answer that? Yad Yamino Ikre. So the other Tana would say, yeah, when it specifies with a modifier that Yad is Yamin, then that means the right hand. Yad Stama Lo Ikre. But if it just says Yad, that always refers to the left hand. Rabbi Nosson Omer, Einot Tzarich. You don't need these psukim. Harehu Omer Ukshartam Uchsavtam. It says when the mitzvah of tefillin in the Shema that we read. There's 2 mitzvahs there, right? Tie them on your arm and write these words on your doorposts, right? So there's a connection between tefillin and mezuzah. Maksiva bimin, just as ordinarily, most people write with their right hand, and we'll deal with lefties in a minute. But people write with their right hand. Avkshira bimin, so do the tying the tefillin on your right hand as well. Excuse me. So if you're using your right hand to tie, where you can tie, you can't tie it on your own. The right hand can't tie the tefillin on the right hand, so it must be doing it on so the active hand is the right hand, and the hand that gets the tefillin tied on them is the left hand. Rabbi Yossi Achorem Hanacha du b'smol minale. So Rabbi Yossi, which is so you should say the same thing about Rabbi Yossi when he says that you use your ukshart al yadecha. So how does he know that putting the tefillin is on the left arm, right? So Rabbi Yossi Acharim was the one that says, I'm not so sure that yad means yamin, right? Yad that yad means small. Yad could also mean yamin. So how does he know where you put it on your tefillin? Nafkalei mehechad nafkalei Rav Nosson. So he has Rav Nosson's proof, the ukshart, the connection between writing tefillin, writing mezuzah, and using your right arm also to wrap your tefillin. Rashi Omer, Rashi has another sense, another source. Mi yodcha, because the word yodcha is written unusually with a hey at the end, right? And it's fill in the parsha of tefillin. Al yodcha on your hand it usually would be yud dalad kaf safit, but here it's yud dalad kaf hey. So what's the drush from that? Ksiv behei, it's written with an extra hey. Keha, so yodcha, the kaf hey reminds you of the word keha, which means weak, and which is your weaker arm is your left arm. Al yadcha, on your left arm. Amalei Rav Ravashi, so Rav says, "V'yema yadcha shabakach." Like maybe it's a little unclear what he means here, um, but maybe the kaf hey is supposed to indicate not keha but koach, kaf ches. Now it's a little strange because the letter is actually a hey, but of course if you want to spell keha, you need another hey. So there's only one hey, so it's also only hinting at it. So maybe the idea is that the ches is kind of sorry the chaf is indicating to read it as koach. Um, but Amarle miksiv v'ches, what? You're getting a ches from a hay? Like that's not the same. Like what are you talking about? Kitanai. So there's actually this discussion was already held by the Tanaim. The Brisa says yadcha behay zu small. Because it's written with a hey, it means the left hand, kehel, the weak hand. Cherim omrim yadcha l'rabos es hagidim, sorry. Yadcha includes someone who has basically an arm that is not usable. Okay, like if you have either an amputated or a withered kind of left hand, you still have to put on tefillin. That's included by the hay of Yadcha somehow. Um, so we do see that there's a source for each of these that Yadcha could be Kehev, could mean your left arm, or it could mean any arm. Tanyidach, we have another teaching. Ein lo zera, what if you have no forearm? Pater min tefillin. You don't have to put on tefillin. Yadcha, Acherim Amrim Yadcha, Rabbos is Agidim. Others say no, that this Yadcha comes to include someone who his left arm is not for physical reasons he's not able to put on tefillin on his left arm. You still have to put on tefillin on your right arm. Interesting though that there is a view that if you can't use your left arm, then you're off the hook. You don't you're exempt from tefillin. But I don't think that's how we pass it.
This is the one without the left arm, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
Here it says Yadcha lerabot et gidem. That's without
Yeah.
a left arm, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So Larabos Zagide means the mitzvah of tefillin includes even someone who doesn't have a left arm that's usable. Right? That makes sense, right? But the other view is that no, if you can't put tefillin on your left arm, you don't have to put on tefillin. That's not our view, but it's interesting that it's such a according to that Tana, it's such an integral part of the mitzvah of tefillin to use your left arm that if you can't, then it doesn't help to put it on your right arm.
So this opinion says one should put it on the right arm.
Yes, right. Tana Rabba. Iter meniach tefillin b'yamino. What about a lefty? So a lefty, according to this brisa, does put on tefillin on his right hand. Shehu Smala, because that is considered his left, right? So for a lefty, for most people who are right-handed, their weak arm, let's say, is their left arm. For a lefty, the weak arm is the right arm, and so he puts tefillin on the right arm. Vatanya, so the Gemara question is from another brisa. Neniach bismolo shehu smolo shel kol adam. You put on tefillin. This refers to a lefty, and this source says you put on a lefty puts on tefillin on his left arm like everybody else, right? So doesn't that contradict the idea that the lefty puts tefillin on his right arm? No, you know who puts on tefillin on the left arm? Of course, right-handed people, but also ambidextrous people who do not have a dominant hand. They're both equally adept. So that person, you could say he could put on either side. So this brisa says no. If you're ambidextrous, put it on your left arm like everybody else. But that still means that if you're actually left-handed, if your left hand is your dominant hand, then you put tefillin. You could still say that you put tefillin on your right hand. Tanzve Menachot. Al yadcha, the Torah says, put him on your arm. Zu kibaris. What part of the arm? The bicep. Beinenecha, zu kadkad. Between your eyes means on the skull. Heicha, where on the skull? Amar dvei Rabbi Yanai, makom shemocha shel tinok rofes. The place where a baby has a soft spot on his head, right? The fusing point of the, you all know where we put on tefillin. That's where it is, where a baby has a soft spot on the skull until the bones fuse. Um, Bamine Plimo me Rabbi. Plimo asked Rabbi, Misha yesh lo shnei rashim. What about uh, a freak of nature, right? But it does happen. Baby born with two heads. If you have two heads, where do you put? Which one do you put tefillin on? Amarle. So he said, "Okum galeo kabel alach shmatis." Like, stop asking stupid questions. Either get out of the base medrash, or you'll be excommunicated for asking stupid questions. Adahache. At the same time, also who gavra, somebody came to the base medrash. Amarle said to Rabbi, "Isialid li yanuka diisli trei rashe." Guess what? I just had a baby with two heads. Um, Kama be'inan lamesav l'kohen. So what's he asking? How much do I give the kohen? So it's a firstborn baby. It has two heads. So ordinarily you'd give 5 shekel to the kohen. But he's asking, is this considered like two firstborns? Should I give 10 shekel? Also, Saba, so an old man came, so an elder came, Tanalay, and he taught Rabbi. Rabbi didn't know because it's a certainly unusual question. Tanalay, he taught Chayav Liten Lo Eser Slime. You have to give 10 slime to the Kohen, okay? Because each one is considered a firstborn. It's one firstborn, but it has two heads. Um, so the Gemara doesn't understand this yet. Any, is that right? V'hatani Rami Barchama, Rami Barchama taught. B'toch shenemar pado tiftas b'chor ha'adam. Since it says you have to redeem the firstborn of the firstborn person, Shamani afilu nitraf b'toch shloshim. What about, when do you do the pidyon ben? After 30 days? What happens if the baby, Rahman al is killed during the first 30 days? You still have to pay up. And the Lomar, so Torah says, Ach, Ach padotifte. So Ach is always cholek. Ach is always it excludes something. So we're excluding a baby that didn't make it to 30 days, does not have to undergo pidyon. Um, so I guess the assumption is, look, a baby with two heads is not going to make it to 30 days, right? It's something that's a birth defect that is certainly fatal. Um, so maybe, um, like, I think the rule is that if something is considered fatal, even if by some, remarkable, remarkable phenomenon that this baby does survive to 30 days, it's still considered a treifa. It's still considered a baby that is not going to survive, and so it's exempt from pidyon, right? So why does this Hahu Saba? Why does this guy come along and say it's 10 stella? It should be zero because this is not a viable life. Because when the Torah says the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben, it uses the word per head, right? It's 5 shekel a head, right? And so we're understanding that to mean if there are two heads, you pay twice, right? So it's ordinarily you would say yes, a non-viable child does not undergo pidyon, but in this case, because it's a head thing, um, each head has to be redeemed for 5 cents. Okay,
I think I recently read about it, uh, that there was a set of Siamese twins that were
mm-hmm,
conjoined at the head,
mm-hmm,
and they lived. They were. It's a very complicated story, but they were until they're 18, 20 years old or so forth. And
mm-hmm.
then at some point, they tried to do the surgery. I don't remember all the details, but this
Yeah,
is,
I read about this also. I also don't remember the details. I think one survived and the other did not.
I don't know. Because I thought they were, what was kind of unusual is they got married. They were twins,
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
girls, I think, and then they got married, even though they were conjoined at the head. It was kind of very
Very
unusual.
bizarre. Yes. Very, very bizarre. But I think, I mean, I don't know the details, but Siamese twins that have two separate bodies and they're just fused, that's a different situation, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about one body with two heads. Whereas Siamese twins generally is two bodies, but they're fused together, right?
Well, isn't it? Wouldn't this be similar? Because the body is what? Well, yes and no. I mean, two heads come
Yeah,
out.
I mean, you'd have to know the details. Obviously, these are freak cases. I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean, they're, very unusual cases. Um, so each one, I guess, would have to be evaluated separately to determine the details but uh, I mean, trying to apply the halacha to these real edge cases is obviously very tricky, right?
So there was a case that came before Rav Asher Weiss
Hmm.
during the war,
Hmm.
after the October 7th, and apparently there was one soldier who had lost both his arms, and he got one arm he wa- they did a prosthesis on the arm. It wasn't one, so forth. Anyway, so the Rav came to visit him in the hospital, and he said, "What do I do? What do I put in tefillin? And how do I wash tefillin? Are you dying?" Rav
Hmm.
Shavai says, "I never got I never got shayla like these. We don't know what
Yeah,
he poskined.
yeah. But like,
He's
how are
one
you
of
supposed to?
he's one of the Gedolei poskim of that, and he said,
Right.
I never got shayla like these before. He was crying.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, yeah. Okay, moving on. Amar Mar, we said before. Yadcha. Zuki Yadcha is your arm. Zuki Baris, that's the bicep, right? Minalan, how do you know? Maybe it means like further down. Maybe it's the hand. The Tanarabanan, because we have a brisa. Al Yadcha Zu Gova Shabayad, the high part of the arm, meaning the upper arm. Atomer Zu Gova Shabayad, Oino El Al Yadcha Mamish. How do you know? Maybe it really means your hand, not your arm. Amar Torah, Hanach Tefillin B'Yad, Hanach Tefillin B'Rosh, because the Torah is telling us put them on your arm and your head. Mal Halan Begova Shabarosh. Where do you put your head tefillin? On the top of your head, right? You don't actually put them bein einecha, between your eyes. You put them opposite the spot between your eyes at the top of your head. Afkan Begova Shabiyad. So the arm too, we're going to use the high part of the arm. Rabbi Elazar Omer Eno Sarech. You don't need that drash. Harei Omer V'haya L'cha La'os. It should be for you for a sign. That's filling. L'cha La'os. So it's for you for a sign. V'lo Acherim La'os. Not for other people to see, right? So if you wear your tefillin on your hand, it is um, everybody will see it, right? If you put it on your bicep, presumably you're wearing a sleeve on top of it, then other people won't see it. So it's l'chol, so it's like an internal sign. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, Eno Sarech. Rabbi Yitzchak says you don't need that drash. Hareu Omer v'samtam es devarai ela al levavchem. Put these words on your heart, ukshartam, and tie them on your arm. So shetehe sima keneged alev. Um, how are you going to have the on your arm and also on your heart? If you put it on the bicep, that's opposite your heart. Rabbi Chiv, Rabbi Acha, Bered, Rav Avia, Mikaven, Umanach Lahadi Libe. And that's where Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Acha would put on their tefillin on their arms near their heart. Um, well, shkoyach. I mean, that's how we all do it. Rav Ashi Hava Yosef Kame Damem. Rav Ashi was before Amem. Hava Syria Biyade, and he had a torn sleeve. The Kamis Chazyan tefillin, and because of the torn sleeve, you could see the tefillin on his arm. Amalei, so he said, "Lo savar lomar lo chol laos lo acher laos." Why do you even put it on your upper arm so that it should be covered? But yours isn't covered. Where's you need a better sleeve? Amalei, so he answered, Bimkom l'chal la'os itmar. It doesn't mean it has to be covered. It means put it in the place that would ordinarily be covered. So, Achman is kind of shiny. Um, it's not important that it actually be covered. It's just that's a hint as to where on your arm it should be worn. Um, Although you will see, like I still remember, when my grandfather taught me to put on tefillin, he insisted that I cover it with my sleeve, roll down the sleeve over it, and it always bothered me sometimes if I was wearing a shirt where the sleeve was tighter or whatever, it wouldn't go around my tefillin. It really bothered me that the tefillin weren't covered. I guess I should have worn a jacket like everybody else on my shoulder, but whatever. Okay. But here the Gemara is
That is a
clear.
custom often that people
Yeah,
cover that
and
that
that's
arm
probably
in the
why.
film.
That's probably why. Yeah.
And there
Um,
are people, and I knew someone once, I learned when he wore tefillin in Israel, this is going 20, 30 years ago, he wore tefillin all day long, took on the custom to wear
oh yeah.
his arm
Uh-huh.
was, and so you could, oh, you couldn't, the arm was covered, but his head, the tefillin on the head was exposed. One could see
Of
that.
course, yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting, right? That clearly the covering of the tefillin is only relevant to the arm tefillin and not the head tefillin.
Although I
Uh,
did hear, now
yeah.
I don't know if I could verify that Rav Cook,
Hmm.
I think the first Rav Cook, he wore tefillin all day long, and
Hmm.
his arm was covered, and but
Hmm.
his head, he had a big, huge hat that he wore, so that the tefillin wasn't obvious even on his head.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay. Gova Shabarosh Minalan. Okay, we said before that you wear your head filling on the top of your head. How do you know? Tatana Rabban, Rabbi Sat, Beinenacha, between your eyes. Zogova Shabarosh, that means on top of your head. Atamar Zogova Shabarosh, Oeno El Beinenacha Mamish. Maybe it doesn't mean the top of your head, maybe it means really between your eyes, maybe it's literal. Nemar Khan Beinenacha, V'Nemar Lahalan, Lo Tasimu Karcha Bein Einechem Lames. So the phrase Beinenacha appears in Tefillin and also appears in the Isur of making of tearing out your hair for mourning purposes between your eyes. So you don't have hair between your eyes. Malahalan Begova Shabarosh. So what does it mean? It means the part of your hair that's opposite, the point between your eyes. That's where you can't tear out your hair. Afkan Begova Shabarosh. So we'll say the same thing about tefillin. Malcolm Sha'osa Karcha, the place where you could make a bald spot, right? Where you ordinarily, or at least in one's youth, where you have hair. Rabbi Hillel Omer, sorry, we don't need this drush. Amar Torah, because Torah also says, Hanach tefillin biyad, put tefillin on your arm, Hanach tefillin b'rosh, and put them on your head. Malahol and b'makom haroy litame b'nega echad, just as the arm tefillin is put on the arm where there's only one type of saras that can afflict that place. Afkan b'makom haroy litame b'nega echad. The head is also where do you put it on your head? Where you can where there's only one kind of saras that you can get, which is where you can get kind of a yellowish hair that indicates saras. But not between your eyes, literally. Diika basar v'seyar, because there you have a little hair. You've got eyebrows, and often you have some hair in between, exactly between the eyes, and you also have skin, so you can get two types of saras there. The you could get saras with white hair or with yellow hair. Okay. Arbat Sisios Makvozuasu. Switching now topics from tefillin to tzitzis. Is you have tzitzis on your four corners of your shirt or your clothing. Um, so they're all integral to the mitzvah. Sharbat and mitzvah achas. It's all one mitzvah. In other words, if you only have three, you're not doing the mitzvah. It's not like you're doing three-quarters of the mitzvah. You don't get three-quarters of the credit. You get zero credit unless you have tzitzis on all four corners. Maybe now. Um, so, 1 second. Oh yeah. So what it leaves out the essential here is Rabbi. It goes that Brisa goes on to say, and it's missing from our text. That Rabbi Shmuel says that there are four separate, each one is a separate mitzvah. Maybe now, what's there, I mean, either way, you're supposed to have four, right? So what's the difference between them, between the two views? Amar Rav Yosef, Sadin b'tzitzis ika b'nayu. If you have um, if you have a linen garment and wool tzitzis. So ordinarily you can't wear linen and wool together, right? So if you say that but for tzitzis you can, right? So if you say that each one is a separate mitzvah and you only have three tzitzis on three corners, then it's fine to have what would otherwise be shatnez. It's fine to have wool tzitzis. But if you say that there's no mitzvah unless you have all four, then if you only have three, then that's a shatnez problem, and you're not exempted from shatnez by the mitzvah of tzitzis. Another answer, Rava Bar Hina Amar, talis ba'alas chamesh ikabinau, or if you have a five-cornered garment, right? So again, if you have, according to the Tanakama, you only need four, and according to Rabbi Shmuel, you need five. This is a little strange because um, um,
How do you have
uh,
five corners?
well, you could have five. Sure, you could imagine a garment that has five corners. Doesn't have to be square. It's a pentagon shaped garment. Think of like a poncho or something that's pentagon shaped rather than rectangular shaped.
Yeah.
Right, that's possible. Um, Ravina Amar. Ravina says to Rav Huna now. There's the difference would be of Rav Huna's rule. Dam Rav Huna. Hayosi b'talis sheina mitziyatzas kihochazah b'Shabbos. What if you go out on Shabbos and uh, you're wearing tzitzis, but it's not in the way that fulfills the mitzvah. So, like for example, with only three, so chayav chatos, then that's considered carrying the tzitzis. It's only if they're accomplishing the mitzvah that they're considered part of the garment. So, if you only have three, so according to the one that says each one is its own mitzvah, you're fine. According to one that says no, you need all four for the mitzvah. If you only have three, then you're it's like you're carrying those, and you'd be over on the mitzvah on the isur of carrying on Shabbos. Amar Shisha Beret
Why
Ravini.
can't you wear any garment?
Yeah,
Can't
but
you?
the tzitzis on them, is the tzitzis on them considered carrying the tzitzis, or is it considered an integral part of the garment?
But
So
it's
if it's
something
the mitzvah, if you're
tied
making
to
the
the
mitzvah with
garment.
them, I'm sorry.
If it's something tied to the garment, if one takes a belt and ties or something or string
Yeah,
and ties it,
so I think the general rule is if it's in a way that people ordinarily wear, then it's fine. But if it's not, like who wears tzitzis except for to do the mitzvah, right? If you tie something onto the edge of your garment for no, and it's not an integral part of the garment, then it could be carrying. I don't know exactly the details of how you determine, right? Like what if you're wearing a bobby pin to keep your kippah on, is that carrying or is it part of the is it well that would be I guess a practical aspect of wearing the kippah. So whatever. There's what I don't know exactly how to decide what's considered part of the garment and what is considered extraneous and therefore carrying. But the Gemara here is assuming that if not for the mitzvah of tzitzis, tying these strings onto your garment would be considered carrying.
I
If
mean,
you're
I'm
doing
thinking
it, that
people wear a bow. They put a bow and they tie a bow onto the blouse under the blouse. Women do this, or
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
wear someone wears I don't know, a handkerchief and
Hmm.
ties it on, or it's a fancy. I mean, it's not necessary for the garment, but they make it part of the garment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it always struck me as a bit of a dodge. I don't know the details of how you would determine if it's valid or not. But I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Like, how is that different than a lot of cases where we consider something tied on to be to be okay to go out with on Shabbos? Yeah, I don't know how we determine that exactly. But here the Gemara is taking the position that there's no other purpose for these strings. Um, there's no that they're not essentially a part of the garment unless they're accomplishing the mitzvah, in which case they are.
And why is it chai v'chater? Is it a lav? Is it
Yeah, for going out on for carrying on Shabbos.
Sometimes with a lav they get malchus though, right?
Oh yeah, if well regular lav, if you do it on purpose, you get malchus. If you do it b'shogeg, you do not. But this is a something that is a death penalty if you do it on purpose. But if you do it b'shogeg, it's a chatas.
Yeah.
Amar Shisha Breda Ravidi. Haimon de Basre Leglime. If you cut a corner off of your coat, lo avi lo kum. You haven't changed it from what is essentially a four-cornered garment, even though you've now made it five. So shavye talis balas chamesh. You just made it a garment with five corners, which, according to what we just saw, you would require tzitzis on four of the corners. Um, is that how we actually paskin? I don't think so. I think we paskin it's only a four cornered garment requires tzitzis, and the position that this Gemara is taking is that if it has five corners, it requires tzitzis on four of the corners. But I
Why
don't
not
think
all five corners?
well, that's a tradition, right? That it's four corners. So the question is, what if it's a five-cornered garment? Do four of them need tzitzis? So that's what this Gemara seems to say, that yes, it requires tzitzis on four of the five corners, but another Gemara seems to say that no, it's only four-cornered garments. Where does the
Right.
four come from? I think that's Halacha Moshe Sinai.
But now this is no longer a four-cornered garment. It's a five-cornered garment.
Right. So according to this Gemara, it seems like a five-cornered garment does require tzitzis, but only on four of the corners.
The next conclusion is Ein Ledavar Sof. Suppose it's a six-corner garment, an eight-corner garment. Would four of them need tzitzis? And which four do you put the tzitzis on? Does it matter? I mean, how far do we go with this?
So it seems like, yeah, it seems like any garment that you have, if it has more than three corners, then it would require tzitzis on four of them. Which four? I don't know if the Gemara deals with that or not. I would think that any four you want. I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we paskin this way anyway, so it's an academic question, right? I think we paskin that only a four-cornered garment requires tzitzis. Amar V'Shasha. Haiman Desire. Oh, I just read that one. Oh yeah, Haiman Desire Leglime. Um, what if you eliminate all the corners, right? Like you modify the garment so it doesn't have any corners. Lo evolukum, you haven't accomplished anything. My tama to command the shari adame. Because so he's not talking about cutting it in a way that changes the garment. He's talking about like tying the corners in a way that it doesn't have a corner anymore. But you can always untie it. So it's still, Rav Mashash is saying it's still a garment with four corners. You're not wearing it in a way that the four corners are visible, but they're still there and they still need tzitzis. Utnaname, and we have a similar Mishnah. Call Hamasos Hatsururos Taros, any leather flasks that have knots at the bottom, like they're not sewed at the bottom, but they're tied off at the bottom, are tahor. So, in other words, they can't become tame. Chutz, because they're not really a kli, right? It's just kind of a temporary thing that you've tied the bottom, so it's not really a kli. It's just temporarily serving as a kli. Chutz mishel arvim, except for the ones that the Arabs use, because I guess that's their normal way of being made, right? So if the normal way is to manufacture a kli so that it's permanent, then if you do it in a temporary way, that doesn't count. It's not a kli. And doesn't become tamei. But if the normal way is to do it in this kind of temporary way, do it with knots instead of sewing, then it is a kli and can become tame. Amar Rav Nimi Minardar. Rav Nimi said, "Haiman dechaite liglime." What if you sew off the corners, right? So of your garment, so you're stitching it so that it doesn't have corners anymore. Lo klum. It's still considered with corners because imisa delomi baile, because you can always undo it. If you change your mind, you can always undo the stitching and becomes a four-cornered garment again. So it's always considered a four-cornered garment. Rabbi Shmuel Omer. So going back to the Mishnah, Rabbi Shmuel said, "Arbatan arba mitzvos." That each of the four tzitzis at each of the four corners are four separate mitzvahs. Amar Rabbi Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Shmuel. We pass it that way. But actually, we don't. Right? Rabbi Yehuda is wrong. We don't pass like Rabbi Shmuel. Really, it's just one mitzvah to have all four. Ravina Ka'azil Abasre Demar Bar Abashi B'Shabsa Derikba. It was Shabbos Chol Hamoed, and Ravina was walking behind Mar Bar Abashi. Ifsi Karna Dechute. And what a corner tore off. The corner with one of the tzitzis tore off his coat. V'lomer loy v'lomide. And Ravina didn't say anything. Kadmatalabese, when they got home, Amalei mehasam ifsik. By the way, while we were walking, your coat got caught on something and it tore off. And mehasam ifsik. And and this is where it happened at the corner of Fifth and 32nd. Amrle, so Mara Baravashi said to him, Amratli, Mehasam Shadise. I should have taken it off because it was Shabbos. And now I only had three tzitzis on my garment. I should have taken off the garment. V'amar Mar Gadol cover of brios. Gemara says, well, wait a minute. What about cover of brios? You're not going to be. You don't want to be walking naked in the street. Um, Shidduchos lo saseh shabbatara, that kavod habrios is so fundamental that it overrides a lav, a negative commandment in the Torah. So, like, then you wouldn't have been required to take off your coat. You could wait till you get home so that you're not walking naked in the street. Tirguma Rav Bar Shaba Kamed Rav Kana. So Rav Bar Shaba explained, beloved the lo tasser. It's not that Kavod Brios overrides a mitzvah from the Torah. It overrides the mitzvah of don't ignore the rabbis, right? So in other words, it effectively only overrides the Rabbanan, but not a Doraisa. So of course, carrying on Shabbos is a Doraisa, so Kavod Brios would not override that. But this is a very important source, by the way, that it's clear that Kavod Brios overrides the Rabbanan. How you interpret that, of course, is kind of subjective, but I think it's an important source.
So
Um,
therefore, he should have taken off the coat and walked naked?
um, no, no, he's saying that because it was a doraisa, it's not. He should have. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, yes. Then he if he had known, he would have been justified in taking off the garment. Yeah. And maybe that's why the one that was walking with him didn't say anything, so he wouldn't put him in that position.
Hmm.
Vigadamre, Mehasam Amrle. Some say the story was that he told him at the time, right when they were walking in the street, and one of the corner got torn off, and he told him right there, V'Amrle, and he said, "My datich lemishye." So what am I supposed to do? Take off the coat? V'Amar Mar, go to the cover of the brios. But what about cover of the brios? Shadochas lo saseh shabbatara. Doesn't that override Shabbos? Then the Gemara asks in this version of Atir Gemara Rav Shabab Kamed Rav Kana beloved lo tasser. But what about this idea that Kavod Abrios only overrides the Rabbanan? And here we're talking about the Doraisa, so he should have taken off the coat when he found out. So Gemara says, "Hachanami Carmelis." You know what? It wasn't in Rishus Harabim; it was in a Carmelis, which is only a Drabanan problem to carry in a Carmelis. So Drabanan, therefore he was justified in keeping the coat on, even though it now didn't have the proper, even though he was now carrying the other tzitzis, as it were. Hadron comments is the end of the third parak, and tomorrow David will pick up with the beginning of the fourth parak.
There's another area in which one can write. There's a carmelit, and then there's a much larger what's it called? A carpulus?
Uh,
Where the area is enclosed, right? We learned about
Car
this here.
Karpov or something.
Yeah, in Erevin, where there's a huge,
Mm-hmm.
like a field with a ranch and there's
Mm-hmm.
a house in the. What's
Yeah,
the name of that?
I think it's Karpov.
Karpov. Yeah,
Yeah.
Uh, how are we defining a Carmelite here? I mean, I would think, I remember the classic example of you're carrying something and you didn't know where to put it. You could put it like on a fire hydrant because that was low enough you could reach it, but not too high. So we learned that as a Carmelite. You could put something down so that you wouldn't be carrying it actually if you realized it in your pocket. And you
Uh-huh.
keep it. That I'm thinking of an object. What's this concept here? Walking in a Carmelite. What would be an example of that?
Well, most places that we encounter, I think, are actually considered the Carmelites. So, in fact, the only reason you can do an Eruv is because it's not I believe, you can't do an Eruv on a domain that's true Rishus Harabim, only
Right.
one that's considered a Carmelis. Um, so, what is the definition of that? So I only remember one possible definition, which is that so much traffic that it's considered Rishus Harabim, right? Like 600,000 people a day or something like that.
Right, 600,000
Right.
people
If
passing
we
at the
go with
same
that, then
area.
there's almost no Rishus Harabim anywhere, right? Like there are very few places in the world where you get that kind of traffic every day, relatively. So, but I don't recall if there are other definitions or if that's the only one. I think it may be subject to dispute.
So this area that there's an area in which one is walking can be considered a Carmelite. Most, but
I think
so if we're
that's
saying if it's less than 600,000 people that pass in
again, I don't know if that's the only definition. I know that's one of the definitions that may be the one that we rely on. I'm not sure, but it is the case that most places by I think by normative halacha are considered a carbon, but that may be why some people don't rely on an eruv. Here I'm speculating, but maybe because they're afraid that the area really is Rishus Harabim Doraisa, and then an eruv wouldn't be effective.
well, that was a long discussion in Borough Park. I lived in Borough Park, and apparently the
Uh-huh.
Rav of the shul in Borough Park, who was the Talmud of Rav Moshe Feinstein, he said Rav Moshe did not allow an Erev Borough Park to Flatbush because he considered that a public Reshut
Right.
Rabim, too many people. And there are other people with a cholek on him, and it was led to some controversy.
Yes, I remember that about Manhattan. Maybe it applied to Borough Park also. I don't.
Yeah, definitely
Okay.
Borough Park.
Uh-huh.
Manhattan was also an issue too.
Yeah.
Manhattan. So some people relied on what was called the seawall
Uh-huh.
around the and others did not. So
Uh-huh. Yeah, so the whole topic is very involved. One requires a lot of expertise to weigh in on matters of having to do with an air roof. It's a very specialized and detailed. A lot of details go into it. So kol hakavod to those who put in the efforts to build and maintain air roofing. Okay, have a good day, everybody.
okay.